The morning of October 31, 1955, unfolded like a quiet painting in East Meadow, Long Island. The sun glinted off car hoods, amber leaves clung to branches before falling in spirals, and the air carried the scent of autumn, dry, crisp, and alive with possibility. It was Halloween, and families were getting ready for costumes and candy, for laughter and neighborhood strolls. No one knew that by midday, a mother's scream would slice through that peaceful illusion, and that a little boy's name would echo through history with no answer. That morning, Marilyn Damman, just 23 years old, was doing what thousands of young mothers across the country were doing: navigating errands with 2 children in tow. Her husband, Air Force Sergeant Jerry Damman, was stationed nearby, and she was raising their son Steven, just 2 years old, and his baby sister Pamela on her own, at least for the day. Steven was a bundle of energy. A toddler with soft blonde hair, blue eyes, and an innocent grin that had the power to melt hearts. He was sweet, curious, affectionate. A boy who had just started speaking in phrases and clutching his mother's hand a little tighter when cars passed by. Marilyn placed both children in the stroller, Steven sitting up front, Pamela swaddled and peaceful, then headed to the local bakery on Front Street to pick up a pie. A simple, everyday task. It would take just a few minutes. She parked the stroller near the bakery entrance, close enough to glance out at them through the window. After all, it was the 1950s. People trusted the world around them. Strangers smiled. Neighbors helped each other. Danger was always somewhere else, not here. Not on their street. She walked inside. 10 minutes passed. Maybe less. But in that brief space of time, a horror unfolded outside. When Marilyn emerged, arms full of pastries and a pie, the stroller was gone. Panic surged through her veins. At first, disbelief clouded her mind. Maybe she walked out the wrong door. Maybe someone moved the stroller to avoid blocking the walkway. Maybe. But the world spun darker with each step. Her eyes darted down the sidewalk, across the street, into doorways. Her heart raced as she shouted Steven's name. Then someone spotted something just a block or two away, the stroller, abandoned. Pamela was still inside, unharmed. But Steven was nowhere to be found. No one had seen anything. No one remembered a struggle. No suspicious vehicle. No woman carrying a child. No scream. No cry. No sound. It was as if the air had simply swallowed him whole. And just like that, a cheerful Halloween morning descended into a nightmare that would never end. The local police were called immediately, but it didn't take long for federal agents to join the search. The FBI became involved within 24 hours. It was one of the earliest major missing child cases to receive national media attention in post-war America. Search dogs combed the nearby woods. Flyers with Steven's face were posted in shop windows. Buses, trains, and airports were checked. Roadblocks were set up. Marilyn was interviewed. So was Jerry. So were the bakery workers, neighbors, and strangers passing through. Everyone had the same answer. They saw nothing. Rewards were offered. The story ran on the front pages of newspapers from New York to California. A nation held its breath. Tips flooded in, most of them useless. One witness claimed she saw a woman boarding a bus with a child who looked like Steven. Another claimed he saw a boy crying in a department store hours away. But every lead fizzled. Every road led to a dead end. One theory lingered in investigators' minds, one that still chills anyone who hears it. What if someone had been watching? What if the abduction wasn't spontaneous, but calculated? Maybe it was a woman who had lost a child of her own. Or a couple desperate for a baby. Someone who watched Marilyn's routine. Someone who knew she would leave the stroller, even just for a moment. Someone who waited for that exact second when her back was turned. That single, silent moment. The idea was horrifying. And plausible. Yet the case grew colder with every passing day. The Damman family was left shattered. Marilyn, once a smiling young wife, began to withdraw. Neighbors said she barely spoke in public anymore. That she no longer pushed Pamela in a stroller or walked the sidewalks of East Meadow. Jerry continued working at the base, trapped in limbo, not knowing whether to grieve or to hope. Steven's face remained everywhere. In the 1980s, his image re-emerged on milk cartons across the United States, as part of a campaign to find missing children. But time had changed the world. Witnesses had died. Files had faded. Memories had blurred. The world had moved on. But Steven's family never did. Then, more than 50 years later, the case was resurrected by a single, startling phone call. In 2009, a man in Michigan named John Barnes reached out to the FBI. He was in his 50s, the same age Steven would have been, and for as long as he could remember, he felt misplaced. There were gaps in his childhood, family stories that didn't make sense, and a gnawing suspicion that he wasn't who he was told he was. Could he be Steven Damman? It was the first real hope the family had in decades. DNA was quickly arranged, compared with Pamela, who was now an adult. The world watched. Journalists dug into John's background. For a moment, the story of Steven Damman was alive again. But the results came back. It wasn't him. John Barnes wasn't Steven Damman. And just like that, the hope was extinguished once more. Today, Stephen Craig Damman is still missing. There have been no arrests. No confirmed sightings. Nobody. No explanation. Whatever happened in those short minutes, from the moment Marilyn stepped into the bakery to the moment she stepped out, has never been uncovered. Steven would be over 70 years old today. If he's alive, he may have lived his whole life unaware he was ever taken. Raised by someone he thought was his real family. Or perhaps, the ending was far more tragic, and the truth was buried long ago by someone who never paid for what they did. What makes Steven's case so deeply disturbing isn't just the disappearance itself. It's the normalcy of it all. It didn't happen at midnight. It wasn't in a remote forest. It wasn't under cover of darkness. It happened in broad daylight, in a quiet neighborhood, on a family-filled holiday, within seconds. And that's what keeps it alive in our minds. Because if it could happen to Marilyn, it could happen to anyone. The story of Steven Damman is more than just an unsolved crime. It's a symbol of how fragile life can be, of how quickly the ordinary can become catastrophic, of how one mother's moment of trust turned into a lifetime of grief. And maybe, it's also a story that still holds a key, somewhere, in someone's memory, in a document, in a photo album, in a deathbed confession waiting to be spoken. Because even after all these years, decades of silence, sorrow, and shadows, we still hope. We still believe in a better ending. We still remember Steven Damman. Because here at Crime Chronicles, every crime leaves a trace and we follow it.